care of that night, and things like that. A lot of fun things planned for the evening. His birthday, we'll have some ice cream, like going to a birthday party and all that. So we'll get some more details out to you this week, but that'll be Sunday night on the 10th, next Sunday night. I had a thought that's been going through my mind for several weeks. This is not unusual for me. I try to work through the ins and outs of things that the Lord brings to my mind, and it's called meditating. That's what you do. You think of things and you try to figure out all the pieces to it. And it's not unusual for this to happen with me. Only this morning, right before I got up to preach, this thought turned from personal meditation to the framework of a message. I haven't actually been arguing with the Lord about this all afternoon, but it just seemed to me like it should be more clear in my mind before I actually tried to preach on it. But all afternoon, this thought has remained, and no matter where I went, no matter how much scripture I read, the thought only increased. So what it is, it boils down to either speaking this or nothing. Now, I would gladly dismiss the sermon at this moment and say tonight's message is optional. But I can't do that. And for you anyway, I'm going to sleep, so you can make it optional if you want it. The problem is, if we're not careful, it'll be easy to misunderstand what I'm trying to say. Because I haven't had a chance, the way I like to do, to think this all the way through and put it all together. So it will seem a little disjointed more than normal. But I'm going to say what the Lord's laid on my heart. You try to hear what the Lord intends for you to hear from what is said here tonight. 1 Corinthians 16, verse number 9. For a great door and effectual is opened unto me, and there are many adversaries. For a great door and effectual is opened unto me, and there are many adversaries. This is kind of the springboard or the foundation of the thoughts tonight. We'll call this Paul's situation report. If you're a military man, you know that a situation, they call it a sitrep, a situation report. And this, you report about what am I facing here, what's the situation look like? This is Paul's sitrep here. There's a great door and effectual is opened unto me, and there are many adversaries. Paul's situation report. Father, we bless your name. We ask that these next few minutes you would make things clear to us. Lord, you know the truth that needs to be understood, and we ask that you would not allow it to be confused with things that should not be understood. We ask that you would just lead us by your Spirit. We ask this in the precious name of Jesus Christ. I want you to take a quick look at this verse and try to figure out what does it mean? What is Paul saying? And then how does it apply to our lives today? What is Paul actually saying in this verse? And how does that apply to me? I'll give you a couple of seconds here. Okay, it looks like most people are either decided they can't figure out what it means, or you've already decided what it means, or you're just not going to attempt it. So where are we at here? So here's what we've got. It's not a very complicated idea. We're not exactly sure what Paul had foreseen at this moment in time here, but evidently, according to the previous verse, Paul is in Ephesus. And he saw before him all kinds of open doors. Now, obviously, these are open doors, opportunities for the gospel, the work of God, to go forward. Paul wasn't a businessman, and he says, boy, I just found a whole new market for my wares. He wasn't some sports guy who says, I just realized, man, all over this town there's places to compete. He was a preacher of the gospel. And what he was confronted with was a great opportunity to have an effective ministry. But that isn't all that he said. In the same breath, he says, there are a lot of adversaries who are trying to hinder this work. I've got these great opportunities, but there happens to be, that's my situation. There's great opportunities, but there is a lot of adversaries to be dealt with here. It's not complicated, and it's not surprising. When I would do good, evil is present with me. Paul's situation report, that's what he gives here. Now, how does this verse apply to us? What is our situation report? I'll get you to think about that for a second. What does this verse mean to us? If we were giving our situation report, what would it look like? Well, the fact of the matter is we often look at our world and think, things are falling apart. People are hard to reach. Our country is morally bankrupt. Just not much can be done. But if we compare our days with the days of Paul, what do we find? You got to think about Paul's day. Who's in charge over the whole world at this point? The Roman Empire. You talk about people who were morally bankrupt. We ain't seen nothing yet if you look at them. If you think about the things that they were doing, if you've read any of this, it's absolutely perverse. The Roman games were so brutal, it boggles the imagination. When I was a young man, I decided that I wanted to write a book about the Roman games. So I actually did a lot of research and put a whole bunch of things, super interesting, the Roman games and how it all worked together. I won't speak much about that. But what you find is unbelievable and absolutely brutal. It was so bad, they were starving to death. In late Rome, they were starving to death. And they must have lost some ships. They sent some ships out to bring back supplies, and they must have lost ships along the way. And on the way, when the guy got there, the captain wrote back and said, "Look, I've only got one ship. Do you want me to bring back grain, because the people are starving, or sand for the games?" You know what the response was back? Bring the sand. The people will starve to death and won't mind, but they can't do without the games. It was so brutal, the people would get so caught up into these games that they said that the women who went to these things all the time, this is super gross, but they would get so caught up in the frenzy that they would jump into the arena and lap up the blood. And you think, this country's morally bankrupt. You say, we ain't seen nothing yet. Now, it may be coming, but we haven't seen anything yet. This is where Paul is at. It's not exactly, Ephesus is not exactly neutral ground. Do you remember Acts chapter number 19? Who did they worship at Ephesus? Diana. Great is Diana of the Ephesians. They're preaching there. All the people of the town drag them into the theater. They fill up the theater with people, and what do they yell for 2 hours straight? Great is Diana of the Ephesians. Can you imagine a bunch of grown men standing there chanting for 2 hours? Great is the Diana of the Ephesians for 2 hours straight? It's hard to even get our mind around it. This is not exactly neutral ground here we're talking about. And Paul, what does he say? Boy, there's a lot of opportunities here for the gospel to go forth and to be effective. What I'm trying to tell you is, we often think that, boy, it's just tough. We just got to hang on until the Lord returns. It's about all that we can do right now. But the reality is, Jesus Christ died on the cross. He rose a victorious Savior, and according to 1 Corinthians 19, the victory is ours. And that verse is not simply talking about Resurrection Day. Matthew 16:18 says, "Upon this rock," referring to Jesus Christ, "I will build my church, and the gates of hell will not prevail against it." Now, most of you have probably not read the ancient classic, The Art of War by Sun Tzu. How many have actually read that? There's a few of you. That's actually a great book. I love it. It's an ancient book. It's been translated into English. I don't know if you ought to read it. It's a great book, though. I don't think probably most of you know. Most of you have probably not been. In fact, I'm guessing that none of you have been to OCS to learn military strategy. You've not been to officer training school in order to learn military strategy. But I'm pretty sure that everyone here knows enough military strategy to know what gates are for.
Are gates offensive or defensive? Without question, there's no way you can use gates for offense. The gates of a city were there for defense. So who's on defense here in Matthew 18? The gates of hell shall not prevail against the church. Who's supposed to be on the attack here? The church. And the gates of hell cannot prevail against it. Upon this rock will I build my church, and the gates of hell shall not prevail against it. The church is to be moving forward, not hunkering down. When we see the world around us, our reaction is not supposed to be, boy, are we in bad shape. We're supposed to say, like Paul, boy, there are some great opportunities here. I don't know if you remember Danny Whetstone, who used to come and preach in our early days of our missions conference. And if you ever saw him get wound up while he was preaching, he could really get wound up and the veins on his neck could start popping. And he was talking about that verse. And he said, I'll quote, he was talking about a message, not that a message he preached here, but a message he preached someplace else. And he said, they keep singing, hold the fort for I am coming. He said, I say we burn the fort. We're supposed to be attacking. There's a lot of truth to that. And we should look at the world around us and say, there are opportunities here. We have great opportunities to be effective in the Lord's work. But there are many adversaries. We cannot forget that. The hindrance to this open door is great. There are many adversaries. Now, to whom does that refer? For a great door and effectual is opened unto me, but there are many adversaries. To whom does this refer? Our knee-jerk reaction is to name political parties or political candidates. Our knee-jerk reaction is to name groups with immoral social agendas. Our knee-jerk reaction is to think of people who irritate us or mock us or have ideas that are contrary to ours. And that's not totally untrue. But to have a knee-jerk reaction to that is to miss the big picture and actually be sucked into a fight on a front that has a dead end. I don't know if you're a Sherlock Holmes fan, but in the Sherlock Holmes stories, there is one character behind all of the evil. Anybody know who? Moriarty. If you've ever seen the Red-Headed League, in there he says, I had to write this out, I wrote it out from memory, but let me read it here. He says, Moriarty is behind all that is evil and nearly half that goes undetected in this city. His agent is often caught, but he, the central brain, is never caught and rarely even suspected. That's what Holmes said about Moriarty. This is what the real picture of the devil. Our real adversary. He's behind all of the evil. And most it goes undetected. And, yeah, his agents, you run into him, his agents, the people he uses, and you fight against them, but he's rarely even suspected of the trouble that he's causing. There are many adversaries. We get mad as his agents, and we stumble into the traps and get ourselves into a mess, but we typically blame the agents and rarely see the one great adversary of man, the devil and his minions. How does the adversary work? How does this adversary that we have, there are lots of them, the minions of the devil, how do they work? Very cunningly, that's how. Let me give you 3 ways that he works here real quick. He lies. He lies. We know that the devil is the father of lies, but it seems like it fails to register in our brain. He lies. Let me ask you a shocking question that I really want you to contemplate through the whole week this week. How many of your decisions this week will be based in lies? First glance, you say, none. I want you to contemplate that this week. How many of the decisions that you're making are based in lies? It's a serious question. The devil only speaks lies. So what we find that the lies have been interjected into our lives at almost every point. He has interjected lies into our lives. He's good at hiding these lies and coating them with just enough truth to make them believable. But what decisions will you make this week that will be based in his lies? He is the father of lies. And if we do not, hey, wait a minute, I got to think here, because he's injecting lies into everything I do. I have got to be careful here. At work, how you react, will it be based on some lie that was interjected into your life? How you respond to your kids, will it be based in truth or what the confusion or the half-truths that came? The financial decisions that you make, the decisions concerning your friends and your relatives, the decisions you're going to make for your future. If you're not careful, you will be making decisions based in lies. We have many adversaries, and the leader of them is the father of lies. Do we really think that we can go through life without him continually injecting lies into our existence? We must be careful because he lies. Number two, he deceives. He deceives. About 20 years ago, somebody donated to the church a whole truckload of vintage magic stuff. Stuff was in a mess, and the kids and I hauled it home a carload at a time and sorted through it. I'd never dealt with magic stuff much before. I don't know if you have or not, but I learned one thing about all that magic stuff. It all had one thing in common. All of it was a deception. All of it. You are thinking one thing is happening, but something different is happening. I'm telling you right now, the rabbit doesn't disappear. He's hidden in a little pocket there. When you pour that glass that's full of milk and you pour it out and it just seems to pour out into nothing, it's gone. It's going into a little secret compartment there. When you saw the man in half, guess what? He's not being sawn in half. It looks like it. And the magician, he does one thing with his hand and you're looking while he's doing something else with this hand. It is all a deception. And this, my friend, is exactly what the devil is doing to us all the time. He is deceiving. He makes you think things are going one direction when they're actually going the other. He makes you think one thing is happening while he's doing something else. It is a deception. It is what he does. He lies and he deceives. Number three, he divides. I don't know that anything that the devil is better at than dividing people. He uses his lies and deceptions to divide. Look at the world in general. What do we have? This country hates this country. This political group hates this political group. This race of people hates this race of people. Look at families. If you can actually even chart in these day and age a family tree, which is super difficult if you've ever done that outside of the Christian realm specifically, if you try to chart the family tree, you're like, what in the world? But what you find is even if you could chart it, none of them are speaking to one another. They're all mad at each other. Why is that? Because the devil is very good at what he does. And what he does is divide people. He uses his lies, he uses deception to divide us. He's a divider of people and he's good at it. So you say, okay, you just undid your first point. For with the devil's lying and deceiving and dividing, what chance can we possibly have for this effectual work that was supposed to be in front of us? The answer is going to sound like a cliche, and it actually is a cliche because we rarely follow through. How do we attack through these open doors? How do we keep from falling to the adversary that is stronger than we are? How can we possibly do this? You know, some of the songs that we have in our hymn book have a military feel that motivate us to jump up and start fighting. Have you ever noticed that? I could list a few of them that make you feel like, all right, let's go attack. You want to know what that's like? This is funny. When I was 7th or 8th grade, we were doing a skit for something, and Dad borrowed 2 pairs of boxing gloves. And so they were laying over there in the front room, and so Dad and I decided to box. Now you have to remember, I was only about that tall in the 7th grade. So Dad had me by probably 2 feet in height on me. He had probably a foot in reach, and he had at least 80 pounds on me. I knew nothing of boxing, and Dad was actually, back in that day, an avid boxing fan. He watched it all the time. So we started boxing. And so I would try to throw a punch, and Dad would block it, and he'd counterpunch. And he'd tag me, and I couldn't land a thing. And he's blocking, and I started to get irritated. I couldn't land a thing on him. And so, pretty soon I'm trying to throw haymakers, just hoping that one will land and knock him on the ground. You know what Dad did? Pop! Right there, right? Closed both my eyes. Almost permanent, I thought. Man, that hurt. I deserved every second of it, though. But this is exactly what your fighting the devil looks like. He toys around with you, and anytime he wants to, he puts you on the ground. If you want to fight him on that front, that's what you can expect. You say, hey, there's an open door, let me run through it. And the next thing you know, you find yourself laying on the ground. Why? Because there's adversaries. It's not, how do we win in this? Well, it's no mistake that in the Gospels, the same thing is said 3 times, and in Luke it's actually the clearest. I'll paraphrase what it says. If you have a strong man, he's going to protect his house and do whatever he wants, is basically what it says. But when somebody stronger than the strong man comes in, he comes in, whips him, spoils him, and then uses his weapons, uses his weapons against him, basically is what it says, and uses weapons however he wants. He takes all the weapons away from him. Now, the devil is stronger than us. He made us a little lower than the angels. So they got us. He's got us by pound, by weight, he's got us. But what is our answer? Jesus Christ is our answer. Our answer is not found in our own muscles. Our answer is not found in our own fighting ability. Our answer is found in Christ. This is where the fight is. This is where the fight goes to. The strong man must be bound and his weapons taken away. The weapons that he's been using against us have been taken away. Which brings us back to Luke chapter number 18, where we were a few weeks ago. The parable of the unjust judge. In that parable, and you're all familiar with that, I assume, did the widow go and try to thump her persecutor and make him do what he needed to do, what he should have done? She knew that was an impossibility. She went to the judge, and what are her words? Avenge me of mine adversary. There's your marching orders. There's your fighting words. you go to God and say, avenge me of my adversary. He's too strong for me. He is tripping me up. He is putting lies into my life. He is deceiving me about what's around. Avenge me of mine adversary. Let me do your will. The answer, our one answer, is prayer. It is such a cliche in our world. Oh, I'm just going to pray about that. But the truth is, we rarely do it. We talk about it. We know it. Intrinsically, we say that's the answer. But it is the answer. Yes. It's not a cliche. It is the only way to defeat the adversary against you. You can fight all day. You can work all night. But the honest truth is you cannot beat the devil. It is Jesus Christ who has the victory. And our responsibility is to say, avenge me of mine adversary. Push him out of the way so I can walk through that open door that is given to me. That I can make a difference in this world. That you can let your Spirit work through me. Avenge me. Push the devil out of the way. My adversaries that would keep me from going through that open door. That I might do as you'd have me to do. We'll find there are many adversaries to prevent us. The answer to that is prayer. And I'm telling you tonight, there is no other answer without that. Yes, sir. There are things that you can do after you pray. But there's nothing that you can do. Until you have done that, you have not even gotten into the fight. The situation report, there are open doors where the gospel would be effective that we could walk through. But there are many adversaries. Avenge us of our adversaries. Father,